Music in video games is arguably one of the most important parts of the production of the entire experience. For example, a lot of music cases can be used either to enhance story elements to help throw out the emotion that they're really looking for, or, on the other hand, music can be used to enhance the gameplay experience to make you think what's really going on is actually a lot better than it really is. For example, let's take a game like Halo, where you throw out the music of Halo, well now you're just suddenly shooting at a bunch of aliens, but then, when you add the really good music to it, it's like adding context to the scenario. Now it feels like a hopeful hero's tale. It is one of my most upheld beliefs that a mediocre game with really good music will always be better than a really good game without good music. So in this video today, I'd like to individually dissect each of the 4 games that you see behind me right now and discuss how in each of these 4 genres, music can severely impact the gameplay and the stories that they're telling. Of course, all of them can do it in a bit of a similar way, but also when you're telling a game in a different setting, in a different genre, how you approach music is significantly different than how you do it in another one. For example, if you're doing an RPG game and you have a really big moment happen, it's a lot different than when you have a really big moment happen in a first-person shooter. So first, I'd like to start off with Halo, a series that I think is arguably a lot more known for its music than it is actually the gameplay itself. Halo on its own is a really satisfying first-person shooter with intelligent alien AI. Coupled with that, you have a really good story, you have really good characters, and you have really interesting enemies. But admittedly, as someone who absolutely loves the original Halo games, without the music, they'd severely lose a lot of the impact that they have. Take this scene, for example. Listen to it without music, and then watch it with music, and see the difference. On the musicless side, you have one guy with a big weapon shooting at a bunch of aliens flying at you because they're trying to kill you. On the music side, you have a lone cyborg on a hero's journey to save the world. You might have the same thing going on each side, but the difference is the side with the music is adding context to the situation. The primary way for a really good first-person shooter to try and actually get out the big situations, moments, and feelings that you should feel throughout the game is that they will take visuals and do visual storytelling, and then the music will enhance the situation. For example, if you've never played Halo Reach, spoiler ahead, but in the scene where Kat dies, there isn't really any exposition going on amongst the soldiers. Rather, instead, you see them all walk to the edge of this building and see everything that happened to Reach, city completely on fire, cat in hand. But what really enhances the mood is the song that they play here. Without this song, I don't know if the same emotion would really be given off. I'm convinced that even people who haven't played the game and don't know what's going on here could listen to that song and cry. So that's how first-person shooters get away with adding music into their games. So what about fighting games? Oftentimes, fighting games don't really focus on stories for the most part, they focus on the gameplay first and the aesthetics. Therefore, the music is normally based around the aesthetics rather than the story. Street Fighter 3 as a game takes a bit more of a hip-hoppy aesthetic, while still being true to lots of other parts of the world and making music around those stages. But for the most part, the focus is 90s hip-hop. In most fighting games, they will either take the approach of focusing on stage music or focusing on character themes. In Street Fighter 3, character themes are the stage music. So the whole idea is that you'll listen to really good music that gets you in the zone for the fight, but also it'll usually be cultural to around where you are. So for example, if you're fighting like Ryu or Makoto in Japan, you'll be listening to music that fits not only their character styles, but also where you're at to make it seem like you're actually there. But also, another thing that really sells fighting games is hype, and especially back then during the 90s, something like attract music or main menu music was extremely important to how the game was sold to consumers. So when you went by a Third Strike cabinet and you listened to the fucking character select screen music, it was like, oh shit, that shit's bumping, man. I want to play some Street Fighter 3.
Yo, yo, yo! Ah!
Select to make your first pick. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
Well, fighting games ultimately use music in a fairly simple way. Character themes, stage select themes, etc. It makes sense. But, you know, now that we're moving away from fighting games, a more simple genre, how about a more hardcore genre like an RPG game? Elden Ring already as an RPG is definitely very different than your typical RPG, which is why I may talk about other RPGs while I'm in this segment here. Because Elden Ring, as a game, and other Souls games, they really mostly use music only when you're fighting bosses. Most of these games are typically very atmospheric, and they want you to get, like, all of the areas into your head. Oh, this is the remains of what used to be, and now you're traveling through what's left. And then it's like, oh, you get into this big boss room, and suddenly there's this epic boss fight with this really epic, like, orchestral music, obviously trying to show that this guy is really powerful and means business. So for a moment, I would like to stray from Elden Ring, and I'd like to talk about another game, Tales of Vesperia. It's more of your typical Japanese RPG game, and why I want to bring it up here real quick is that some other methods that RPGs will use for music, for example, is when you go into certain towns, every town will have their own music. This is another thing you might see in Pokemon or Final Fantasy. Towns will have their own music to make it feel like their own place. The purpose, especially with the ever-changing world going on around with the events that you'll be doing throughout the game, is basically to make it feel like that you've made an impact on this area so that when you come back, even though that familiar music is there, everything looks completely different. So now when you come back and you hear that nice like music of Hulur, for example, oh, well now everything looks completely destroyed and devastated, or you come back to Hulur and everything in Hulur is really nice and the flowers are blooming. It definitely helps to give like certain cities or certain towns a vibe, so you know the kind of people there and what you're dealing with. What I've always really liked about Souls games is that because they don't rely on music too much and it's mostly atmosphere, now everything in the game becomes visual storytelling, and you can kind of get a backstory of the area, and in turn that'll give you like a background of the guy that you're about to fight. But the true beauty of what makes the music of the Souls games so good is that not only is it like a tool that kind of like gives a subtle backstory of the person that you're about to fight, and it also helps express the emotions of the boss that you're fighting, for example when they go through transformations, but also the music tends to evolve throughout the fight when your enemy changes tactics or he decides to use new moves, or for example like I said when he transforms. My all-time favorite boss in any Souls game is Sister Frida from Dark Souls 3. It starts out with this real quiet, peaceful music with just a 1v1 between you and another that is able to wield Ash. But then when you kill her, she's brought back to life and the music kicks up, and now it all of a sudden becomes a 2v2 fight. But then, when you kill them, everything changes again, and instead you hear some talking in the background, but you just assume that she's dead. But then she takes the power of her dead father, and then she uses that to make herself even stronger and tries to kill you again. And each time when you go through each phase, the fight is constantly evolving and the music changes to adapt to what she's doing. Because RPGs are such vast, big budgeted, like expensive video games, they can do tons of things with music to not only bring out emotion, but to also make fights more interesting. But after that, what about a game that's a lot less RPG-ish and a little more story-focused? Metal Gear Rising is a game that I believe needs no introduction, especially with all the memes that have been happening throughout the last few years. This game will always show up, have a few weeks of memes, or even a couple of months worth of memes, go away, and then next year show up again. It's amazing. It shows you how this game has really stood the test of time. And admittedly, its music is an incredibly good part as to why that is. To talk about how it works in gameplay, it simply works fairly similarly to Elden Ring, where Yeah, when you're beating them up, they will evolve throughout the fight and change their tactics. And in turn, this does change the music. The fights in this game are a little more like set pieces. Yeah, there's still a bit of a challenge to them, and there's actual patterns, and well, this game isn't one difficulty, rather you set the difficulty. Of course, if you're playing on the highest difficulty, that automatically makes you a Chad. But the point is, the music evolves with the fight, basically. The reason that the music in Metal Gear Rising is actually here, even though it kind of plays a similar role as it does in an RPG game, is because I actually just want to honestly praise the music of this game. And the fact that it does storytelling kind of like Elden Ring's does, except it literally gives you the entire backstory of the characters if you listen in closely, or just listen to the OST on its own after you've played the game or something, and just pay attention to the lyrics. Each and every song based off of a character just tells their story. And throughout the game, you don't really learn too much about the characters you're fighting. Like, you don't really see Senator Armstrong throughout most of the game. Like, he's there in a couple of scenes before you see him at the end, and Jetstream Sam's there at the beginning. But it's not quite like a game for them to go out of their way to make a musical masterpiece that tells the entire story of every character. I don't know, something like that is just so intriguing to me. Because the songs are also extremely well done and interesting to listen to, it actually makes the concept kinda cool. They give you just enough context in the game, and then they give you like a ton more if you really care about it through the song while you're fighting them. And it's just awesome. I can't stop praising it. This is actually just a section of me nerding out in the video. Off the cuff. Going a little off script. Fuck it. Now, Metal Gear Rising does use music in other sections. For example, there's the VR missions, and there's just the normal segments of the missions, because it is more than just, you know, fighting the bosses. There is the segments where you're going through the missions and everything, and those songs are okay. I think they're used appropriately. I don't think any of them are really that crazy compared to the boss themes, but they're good. They're good. It's just, hey, here's some good music to go with the hack and slashing. Then it's, hey, here's some really good music as you're kicking the shit out of this boss. And then, of course, here's some alright music to listen to in the cutscenes also. But I really appreciate it. I really like it. Like, it does this hybrid of, like, kind of what RPG games, like, what Elden Ring does. And then it also kind of does what fighting games do, right? Like, every boss has their own theme, but every boss has a theme that feels important to them, right? When I go into, like, a room in Elden Ring and I fight a boss, I'm not like, oh, I could totally sit down and listen to this theme and instantly think it's this boss. No, I think the music in Elden Ring does a good job at storytelling more of the environment and kind of a bit of what the boss is doing. Where the bosses in Metal Gear Rising, it is literally telling their story, right? It's like having a character theme in a fighting game. It's a good hybrid. I really appreciate what they did there. But that's all there is to this video. I appreciate that you watched. Thanks. If you have any comments, please leave them down below. I am always happy to have an interesting discussion, reply to people down below, and leave them some hearts. Maybe you like some hearts. I don't know. I can spread some love.